That testimony formed the backdrop for today's hearing. Remember how bad this thing was, worst of the worst. And then, with that understanding fresh in our minds, let us try to get to the bottom of how it happened. Well, here's one theory of what happened that day. You might think the attack on the Capitol was carried out by supporters of former President Trump. You might think that because they carried giant flags that said Trump and because they chanted things like "Fight for Trump" as they stormed the Capitol after a rally in which they were incited to do so by President Trump. You may think that white supremacists and other extremist groups were responsible for some of the violence that day because members of those groups have been arrested and charged in the ensuing weeks since the attack. And also because all of the witnesses at today's hearing, one after another, all uniformly confirmed that white supremacists and other extremist groups were among those who attacked the Capitol. But Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin had a wildly different take today. Senator Johnson used his few minutes of question time today to muse aloud and read a right-wing blog post into the Senate record about how the whole Capitol attack on January 6th was actually carried out by anti-Trump protesters. You see, all the people who committed all the violence that day, they were faking being Trump supporters when they really weren't. It was secretly anti-Trump people who dressed up as pro-Trump people. It was like an elaborate holiday pageant. Yes, everything was all very festive, as Senator Johnson described it, until these anti-Trump provocateurs in costume started a riot. This was not like a guy heckling the hearing today. Ron Johnson was actually the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee when Republicans ran the Senate. They made him chairman of Homeland Security. Well, gee, gosh, I don't know. Have you considered that maybe this whole thing was a clever costumed stunt by President Trump's opponents? Have you considered that? I read a blog about it once on the Tweeter. The Democrats now run the Senate. Amy Klobuchar runs the Rules Committee. She was one of the committee chairs running today's hearing. She said this later on today after the close of the hearing, pointedly. She said, quote, "As our hearing concludes, I want to make one thing clear. Provocateurs did not storm the Capitol. They were not fake Trump protesters. The mood on January 6th was not festive. That is disinformation." Disinformation that was spread by Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin at this hearing. And while Senator Johnson used his time to spread that disinformation, his successor, his Democratic successor, who's the new chair of Homeland Security, Michigan Senator Gary Peters, who will also join us tonight, he spent his day today trying to run, an actual hearing with questions and useful information that advances our understanding of what happened on the 6th.
What did you see that leads you to believe that this was a coordinated attack?
One, these people came specifically with equipment. You're bringing climbing gear to a demonstration. You're bringing explosives. You're bringing chemical spray, such as what Captain Mendoza had talked about. You're coming prepared. The fact that the group that attacked our West Front attacked our West Front approximately 20 minutes before the event over at the Ellipse ended, which means they were planning on our agency not being at what they call full strength. Watching the other event, saying, hey, that event's ending. Okay, everybody get on post. They're going to be marching our way, knowing that we may not be at full strength at that time. And then also the fact that we were dealing with 2 pipe bombs that were specifically, set right off the edge of our perimeter to, what I suspect, draw resources away. I think there was a significant coordination with this attack.
Clearly, here we got a coordinated attack. All of you saw this immediately the way they were doing. I can imagine the conversations with the National Guard. And, Chief, you were stunned by the tepid response. Could you clarify that and tell us exactly how those conversations went?
There was a phone call that was convened between several officials. Chief Son was on the call, literally pleading there were several Army officials that were on the call. I don't know all by name who were on the call. Several officials from district government that were on the scene. Chief Son was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard. And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes. The National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way. Yes, the National Guard are being restaged from traffic posts to respond. The response was more asking about the plan. What was the plan for the National Guard? The response was more focused on, in addition to the plan, the optics, how this looks with boots on the ground on the Capitol. And my response to that was simply, I was just stunned that, I have officers that were out there literally fighting for their lives. And, we're kind of going through, what seemed like an exercise to really check the boxes, and there was not an immediate response.
One of the things that is still unclear all these weeks after the Capitol attack is why there was this apparent lack of urgency at the Pentagon that day, why the Pentagon seemed to not get what they were being asked to do, and why. Why didn't they immediately respond when they got these urgent calls about the need for the National Guard to come supplant the defense of the Capitol while the attack was underway, while the violence was, in fact, heading toward its apex? I mean, this is a call that's taking place in the 2 o'clock hour as the Capitol is being overrun. They're being begged to send in the National Guard. And the response, as the chief just said there, was not an immediate, yes, the National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way. I mean, one thing that did not come up in today's hearing, but that has still not been explained about that desperate phone call that the D.C. police described, the D.C. police chief described, is that the Pentagon initially lied about one of the military officers who was on that call. The Washington Post reporting last month that after Trump's disgraced national security advisor Mike Flynn told President Trump that he should use military force and martial law to seize power despite the election results, Mike Flynn's brother was at the Pentagon and on that call, the call where the Pentagon allegedly slow-walked approving deploying the National Guard. Mike Flynn's brother, Lieutenant General Charles Flynn, has denied that his relationship with his brother was any sort of factor in the response to the Capitol attack. But the Army has not explained why they repeatedly lied when they insisted multiple times that General Flynn's brother had nothing to do with that decision. He wasn't in on those meetings, wasn't in on that call, when in fact he was. And so to have one of the central figures in the president's election conspiracy and the QAnon conspiracy, one of the central figures promoting the disaster that was January 6th, to have his brother involved in the inexplicable Pentagon decision on January 6th to not send the National Guard to help the overrun Capitol Police. That seems like something we should learn more about. We need to learn a lot more about the Pentagon's lack of a response when they were being begged to respond in real time. At the end of today's hearing, Senator Klobuchar, chair of the Rules Committee, summed up a number of things that we learned from today's hearing, that there should be changes to how requests from the Capitol Police are approved when they need help or resources. There needs to be better intelligence sharing between agencies. Some security changes are needed at the Capitol building. The use of the National Guard needs to be examined, how approvals are made when more troops are requested. But then, so she summed up what happened today at this hearing, which is very helpful after this dense, long hearing, especially because it's the first one that has looked at what happened on January 6th. But then as soon as the hearing was over, Senator Klobuchar announced that there is going to be another hearing next week, a second one. And that one is going to include Pentagon officials to get to the bottom of, among other things, what happened when the call came in for the National Guard. And the answer was basically no. It was de facto no for hours. So today's hearing was finally something, and it was something. It was also just the beginning.